think we're looking just for Lauren at this point.
Sure.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what the this is. I'm sorry, I just joined, but let's go for it. That's good.
Okay, your meeting is now live.
I'd like to welcome those that are here. We're still waiting, I think, on maybe one participant. And to all of you in the public, we appreciate you having the interest to turn us on and study this event. We have a very simplified agenda tonight, but I think it will cause a lot of discussion, and I'm sure in the chat box there'll be discussion also. So I'd like to get this thing started. We only have to 8:30. We will stop at 8:30. If time permits, we'll have questions at the end of this meeting. So I'd like to start with asking Mr. Jeffrey Zients if he would be willing to read us the most up-to-date and current ZTA. And I would hope that each one of the participants would be looking through it. And Jeffrey, maybe you can tell the onlookers where they can, if they can find this thing, where they can find what you're reading.
Actually, I'll put a link in the chat.
I'm trying to share my screen. Can everybody see it?
Wow. Yes.
Okay. So that this way I'll keep everybody on the same page, or at least the page I'm talking about. The first thing the ZTA does is in defining a solar collection system. And the solar it adds a new provision that says that solar collection systems are facilities that comply with the requirements of state net metering program under the Maryland Code, Section 7-306 and COMAR 20.50.10, including community solar energy generating systems, aggregate net energy metering systems, and projects limited to a percentage of on-site energy use. A solar collection system use does not include a facility rated at more than 2 megawatts AC of electricity. Such facilities may be allowed as a public utility under Section 367E, which is a separate use requirement that requires conditional use approval, by the way. So here is the basic structure, is that it sets up two different types of standards for whether you're producing 200% of your on-site energy needs or less. So the first provision on the 200% of electricity use or less is that it's allowed as an accessory use where it doesn't produces up to that limit on an annual baseline energy use on site, and must satisfy the following requirements. Solar panel setbacks may encroach into setbacks as allowed under Section 4.1.7 B.5.c and may exceed the height limit allowed under Section 4.1.7 C.3.b. All of that encroachment provisions and height provisions are when it's really on top of a building. So it deals with roof lines, or whether you have a bay window is an exemption. You know, there are minor allowances for going into setbacks when you're on a roof line. It does nothing if you're on the ground. So it's just a provision for that. All of these other requirements are existing requirements for what you can do or not do on removal of trees. You can't remove them if they're otherwise a condition of approval. That's all the same requirement.
Okay, can I just, we said that at the beginning of this, that if we wanted to just flag an item for later discussion, the removal of trees item is one that I'd like to flag, if that can be noted by the co-chairs.
Okay, just note that's no change from the existing code.
And sorry, I had missed that point at the beginning, but I also wanted to flag an item, just back up in the definition section on solar pipes, solar collections, solar energy connection systems. There's one small suggestion I have in that area.
Okay. I hope somebody else is keeping these notes because I'm worried about what I'm going to say next.
I got it.
Okay. All right. So all of those provisions we just went through on things that are 200% of on-site use or less are allowed without a site plan. You don't need a site plan to do it. Now we're going to talk about stuff that does need site plan, which is when you produce more than 200% of on-site energy. And again, there are requirements for facilities outside of the AR zone today. All of those requirements would still apply. And this exception that's being added here is an existing exception for facilities. It's not a major change to anything. The reason the fencing requirement was taken out is because there are some situations where you may not want a fence if a fence provision would require removing existing vegetation. So it didn't want to be an absolute requirement for a fence. But then again, later on, we'll say you cannot prohibit a fence. This section 2 on rural residential, commercial, residential employment and industrial zones, none of this has changed. It's all the same. It doesn't even increase the accessory use provisions for 120%. No change.
Jeff, can I pause you there a second? You might
Sure.
want to mention to the audience that we're skipping over some sections because they're deleted. So maybe you can explain the markup and what the brackets mean and that sort of thing.
Okay, right. Whenever you see double underlining in this, it means the change was made after it was introduced. If you saw it single underlining, it means that was proposed in the original routine as added text. When you see a single bracket, it means that the section's going to be deleted. So it's not there anymore. And if it's a single bracket, it was deleted recommended for deleting in the introduced version. If there's a double bracket, it means it was recommended for deletion by the committee. So it occurred after. And you'll see it's a slightly different organization, so that we had these two provisions, one dealing with the accessory use and one dealing with the use that would require site plan approval. Because most of the conditions for the AR zone approvals are within site plan itself. But as I was saying here, the non-AR zone residential land and commercial land, all of this section in substance has not changed. There's a slight organizational change just because to make it parallel with what we just did with the AR zone, to have an A that says it's an accessory use producing, in this case, 120% or less, or it's producing more than 120 and site plan is still required. Those are still existing requirements for those zones. So we're really focused on the AR zone. So we'll go there.
1 second though, as you're going down, I see item 7. Okay, so that item 7 there on lines 9 through 100, I'd like to flag that for future discussion, please.
Well, 102, this is the start of where the site plan specifics are.
That may be, but I'd still like to flag that language for future discussion.
And I'm
Which
sorry.
language?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, when you make note in this particular ZTA of from line 97 through 100 about the PSC and larger facilities than 2 megawatts.
Okay.
Is that in there? If it's in there, I'd like to flag it for future discussion.
This 97 to 100 is deleted.
Okay, that's deleted. Okay. So that doesn't reappear. That language is gone. Is that correct?
I have to go back to my memo. I think the committee ultimately recommended retaining this language so that it still existed in code, so that if it was over 2 megawatts, it should be handled as under the public utility use code provision, which required a conditional use approval.
Then I reiterate my request to flag that for future
Yeah,
discussion.
actually, I think that, remember Andrew made a motion to strike this language under the theory that we don't need to be copying state law into our zoning code. Wasn't that the section?
This was a matter of a case in the Court of Appeals where the court deemed the legislation to have preempted us for these larger facilities.
Right, we put it in to let the public know that this was the case. And I think Andrew convinced the joint committee to strike it because it was, in a sense, superfluous and it didn't have any legal binding effect.
That is true.
And if that's
All
the
right, so
case-
we'll talk about it later.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, well, I got a question. We can talk about it, and I think that's proper. Is it in here now, or is it not?
As it's going to the full council, it's not in there. See
Okay.
the double brackets?
Right. So it will not be, the text will be removed in the version that goes to the final council deliberation, correct?
In the joint committee's recommendation to the council, it's recommended it be removed. The council can then do what it chooses to do.
Just as a point, this is what's before, the council, but there will be something that's new before the council once the joint Fed T&E committee relook at this. So they will make a new recommendation, which will be what the council will be before the council. So
Thank you. That is correct. This is all a slightly different procedure. I thought this was ready to go to council, but it's not. So we'll go back to the joint committee again. All right, now here we get to the heart of the restrictions in the AR zone. And these are the findings necessary for site plan. We went through those first categorization that said, if you are larger than 200% of on-site use, you need site plans. These are the requirements in the AR zone to get that site plan, findings that the planning board has to make. The first thing is, and I'm sure you're going to want to talk about what soils you can be classified, and these are exclusions. So it says property zoned AR proposed for a solar collection system. The solar system is not located on soils classified by the United States Department of Agriculture as soil classification 1.
Okay, Flagging that one,
of course, in a stream buffer.
flagging that one.
Oh, you don't want it in a stream, you want it in a stream buffer?
I want to know what you mean by stream buffer, by whose definition, that's what.
Planning, it's always the planning board definition in environmental guidelines. Number 3 on wetlands. And again, you could define these things, but it's based on the planning board's environmental guidelines on slopes equal to or greater than 15%. So that's where it's not located. So end of that provision. New provision is topsoil has not and will not be scraped from the site. C, grading and soil removal will be minimized. D, the area under the solar facility must satisfy one of the following requirements. It must be designated pollinator friendly under the Maryland Pollinator Friendly Designation Program. Planted, managed, maintained in a manner suitable for grazing farm animals, or planted, managed, and maintained for any other agrivoltaic plant material.
Flagging that section.
I'm sure, no doubt. I mean, this is the section you would think is most of interest here. Removal of trees.
You just have to flag 107. You know, we're gonna have to come back and revisit this. Clear on down. Where you want to stop, Caroline?
Bring it on down there. Jeffrey?
Yeah,
What was the last?
removal
Down
of
to
trees.
131, down to 131.
Yeah,
You gotta go further than that.
Let's check it out. Scroll forward. Forest conservation easements, satisfied any tree, floodplain, blah, 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 requirements, sediment control.
You gotta go to 150.
Yeah, we'll just have to go through that to see.
yeah,
how-
it goes down to 150.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, there's every bit about this. These are the specifications that the committee recommended. And these essentially were all different and
Could I ask a question? When we say we're flagging it, what does that mean? Does that mean we'll have questions about it later? Or does it mean something more?
It means that there may be questions and potential recommended suggested language to help address concerns with the items in that area. So when we get to our amendments section, we may be able to either individually or collectively make some suggestions on how to deal with the concerns with some of those items.
okay, knowing that.
Okay, but let's be clear that the questions are separate from the amendment process. The amendment process is our second item on the agenda. I presume when you just want questions that, that's just to clarify what this means.
Well, I at this point, unless, I don't mean to speak for others in the group, but I think we've asked questions and we've gotten answers, and we either still have concerns or we don't. So if people have questions for Jeff, I would hope they'd ask him now, but I'm flagging these for future discussion during the amendment process, just to let people know that that is where the concern arises from that particular item. So it's clear when we're doing amending language.
Yeah, that's fine, but I'd like to see the proposed amendments written down before the meeting so we can examine them and decide what we think of them.
Well, since we're not voting tonight.
If you have some amendments drafted.
Right. So Doug, I know some people had written amendments, like meeting 1, but some of us wanted to discuss items before committee writing. We have another meeting. We do hope folks will agree. We have at least one more meeting to be able to review and vote on potential amendments. But I don't know that anyone was prepared, and I believe the agenda.
Okay, but
we're not voting tonight.
All right, folks, let's grab this back for Jeffrey and let him finish. He's done a good job. He's getting through this thing. Let's finish what we started, which was to let him read this thing and then we will have some questions on it.
Okay, when last I stopped, I was at like a line 128, which is the removal of trees or landscaping otherwise required or attached as a condition of approval of any plan application or permit for the installation or operation of a solar system is prohibited. The forest conservation requirements of section 22A must be satisfied. Any tree in or on a floodplain, stream buffer, steep slope, critical habitat, contiguous forest or historic site, and any champion tree or other exceptionally large tree must be left undisturbed unless disturbance is allowed under section 22A 12B1, and that's a waiver provision for the planning board's decision. The requirements of Chapter 19, erosion, sediment control, and stormwater management must be satisfied, except for pad areas for transformers and electrical equipment. The use of concrete must be prohibited. That's to allow it to get back to farmland if it ever ceases to be a solar facility. Screening that satisfies section 59653CA, option A, on the side of the facility within 200 feet of any neighboring house is required. However, a fence may not be required or prohibited. Written authorization from the local utility company that allows a solar collection system to be connected to the utility grid must be submitted, and the land area approved in addition to all other site plan approvals will not exceed 1,800 acres of land. That is the codified section of code. There is an uncodified section of code that's a direction to the planning director to report on the total acreage of solar collection system that receives site plan approval by the planning board. And that is it.
I'd like to flag that, please, that section there.
Yeah, and are we asking questions about this or are we just reading it right now?
You can ask questions. Jeff, I would like to suggest that you explain for everyone here what the site plan process kind of generally is. I think that might be helpful.
The site plan
provisions are in the site plan.
Site plan approval is an approval process by the planning board that includes a public hearing to look at the detailed layout and provisions of what is being proposed. There's a whole number of findings in addition to these particular findings that they must go through to get to an approval. It requires its own vote. It's very distinct from just being allowed to build, as most things are in the agricultural reserve. Other than that, this reporting requirement, again, this is non-codified, which means it's law. It is law, but it's a direction directly to the planning director in this case that we expect these reports.
Thank you. Thank you. And as we said in the beginning, we flagged a few areas, and Al, I'm going to call on you because I think you was the first one to flag something, and my apologies, but I didn't catch the lines that you was talking about.
Okay. It's very simple, and it's right back in the very first section where solar collection systems are defined. There, the references are to the existing state law on net metering, which is that 7036 and the COMAR 20.50.10. I would simply suggest adding the reference that because there have been questions both in the chat and in discussion about where does it mean by community solar? Where does it specify community solar? I would incorporate COMAR 20.62, which is a set of regulations that actually defines the state's community solar program. It's COMAR 20.62. It has all the specifications about what they are, the carve-outs, for example, for low income, low moderate income households, the allocation by utility area, all of the other things that are part of the community solar pilot program, including obviously the definition, are in COMAR 20.62. So simply adding that reference to the references you have is, again, maybe belt and suspenders, but it is also makes it clear to everybody what we're talking about.
Is there any other comment on that? I mean, this is productive. He's putting exactly what he's.
Yeah, I would agree with the,
Yeah,
oh, so sorry.
Doug, a comment? Could I?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd support that. I think it's important to clarify not simply that this is community solar, but that it's community solar under the state's community solar law, which means that it's got to satisfy a variety of requirements. Some of those requirements are repeated here in the ZTA, but the point is that it would be required to satisfy all the state's requirements, whether we repeat them in this ZTA or not. So I think that's, that's a relatively small change, but a good one.
Doug, can I ask a question?
Yes, Randy.
Does that state definition now that you just asked, that 60, I don't have the number, I'm sorry, I apologize, but does that actually mean that our electric providers in our immediate area of Montgomery County in the AR zone are the ones that are going to tie on to those?
Al, you answer that because you are very familiar with it.
Yeah. What it simply means, Randy, is that wherever a solar developer is allowed to build a project within their utility area, that project has to conform with all the conditions under 20.62. For example, there are a whole set of consumer protection definitions in that law and so on. And it simply basically says, if you're participating in the program, this is what the program is, this is what you have to do. It incorporates the same 2 megawatt limit, for example, that the bigger net metering law incorporates. The bigger net metering law is sort of an umbrella, but it covers more than just community solar. So 20.62 just makes it specific to all those things that are part of the state's defined community solar project, which was, passed by the legislature and then regulated by the PSC.
But it also means that the citizens of Montgomery County might very well not get any use out of it. Is that correct?
No, that's not true. I'm actually signed up for community solar. Just happens to be built in Prince George's County because it's within the Pepco area.
So, yeah, but that's in Prince George's County. We're not talking about what's
No,
happening.
but I live in Montgomery County.
I know, but we're talking about the AR zone right now.
Right. So
we're talking about the AR zone, and the fact of the matter, these things could be built and maybe not one citizen in Montgomery County or in the AR zone will get any use out of them. Is that correct?
Yes. So this is where I have a suggestion for an addition to that section, but I don't know if it's appropriate to make that here or wait until we talk about amendments.
I would suggest that
Could we deal with Al's suggestion first and then we can go on to other amendments?
Sure.
Okay, it has to do with this section though, so okay. Go ahead.
I'm interested in hearing what Lauren has to say, but it sounds like it might be amendment in the amendment section, but of course that's what Al's suggesting, but that's good. I would like to know if someone can explain to me whether even with Al's good suggestion here, does that mean, I mean, I'm looking at these others, the aggregate net metering systems and projects limited to a percentage of on-site energy use. can someone explain to me, does that mean systems that are not community systems are also allowed? So we're just saying community solar is one thing, and then we're going to have other projects as well that don't have, for example, affordability baked in?
We talked about what the aggregate net metering, aggregate net energy metering system was last week. It allows entities that are qualified nonprofits, agriculture, or local and state government to combine their uses and have a facility, and only those routines. So they are not open to the general community. It's for those entities. So that's one. The second one on the percentage of, now I have to flip my screen back again. Limited to percentage of on-site energy use, that's the 200% limit that we have
Thank
for
you.
accessory.
Right. So thank you very much for reminding with regard to the aggregate net metering. Those systems for those particular institutional uses or nonprofits, are those institutional uses or nonprofits those consumers within Montgomery County, or could those be entities in, you know, Pennsylvania or what have you?
It couldn't be in Pennsylvania unless Pepco went to Pennsylvania. I don't think they do.
So you're,
Again, I believe it's you have to be within the same, and I'd have to look this one up to tell you the truth, that it has to be within the same service area as the utility.
that's right.
They
So
do have to
if-
be in the same service territory as the utility, but even if Pepco were to go to Pennsylvania, it still would not allow, you
Right.
would still not be allowed to go to.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get to, just trying to find out who the end.
So where would it, Leslie, where would it be allowed to go to?
So any customer within that utility territory, according to Comar 2062, is can be subscribed to the community solar facilities.
No, I'm not talking about community solar. I'm talking about aggregate net energy metering systems.
I'm gonna let Franny answer that because that's well beyond my scope.
Yep, so aggregated net metering is limited to the use by the account holder, the utility account holder, who is, I guess, basically contracted for the solar array to feed their specific accounts. So if Montgomery County Schools, for example, or Montgomery County government, for that matter, have entered into a net metering agreement, an aggregated net metering agreement where
Mhm.
multiple facilities around the county that they want to offset that load from solar. The solar array could be under, and this was early in the discussion of this ZTA, people wanted to include aggregated net metering. They didn't want to be precluded. So that's why it's in there, to make sure that the county could benefit from it. So, but it is limited to county, municipal government, schools, and nonprofits. So it's not just any commercial person can subscribe to it. So there again, by definition, our boundaries already set in.
So these projects, say it were the county schools wanted to do it, where would the solar panels go? Would they go on the school buildings and property, or would they go on Randy's farm?
No, typically that's the whole point, that they have a larger system because the school roofs aren't big enough to generate enough solar to offset their entire load. So they would need a larger up to 2 megawatt system to do that.
Okay, so they would go on a piece of property in the agricultural reserve,
They could,
and
yes.
and they would serve, well, yes, because that's what this is about. And then they would serve someone in that service area that is a nonprofit, a school, or an agricultural program. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So one concrete example is that actually the county already has one aggregate net meter project that's providing some of the county's electricity for essential services. And the one that's being built that's under contract now on the Oaks landfill is also an aggregate net metered project, in addition to the 2 community solar projects that are being built for a total of 6 megawatts on the Oaks landfill.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so one of them is going to serve the, county institutions and government
Uh-huh,
for all of their buildings.
that's
'cause
great.
they can't put it everywhere. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Okay, thank you. So do I guess I still wait for my amendment, right?
If you have an amendment, we'll hold that for a while if you would
Okay,
be kind enough. I think the
Yeah, could
next
we-
area
could we-
that was
Could
flagged,
we do this?
Should I make a
Al-
motion? Should I make a motion to just, that we would recommend, unless, Jeffrey, would you need a motion to make that change to add 20.62 to that list of references? And if so, I will make such a motion.
You're
Well, that's
not
an
asking
amendment.
me, are you? I'm not in charge.
Yeah, just, how do we get it made? Should we make it?
I think we'd like to wait till we go through these flag things, and I know this may sound odd to you, but we got item 2 is a presentation of amendments by category. And we'll
Okay,
come
recognize you.
back to it.
so just flag it. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience. The next section that I have notated was, I believe, line 36 through 39, Jeffrey.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was me. So there's been some confusion about this particular item. And I just wanted to flag this because what it says is that removal of trees or vegetation, landscaping is an interesting word for the ag reserve, but otherwise required or attached as a condition of approval of any plan. So this really, in the end, doesn't end up being a real strong protection of trees or forests. It ends up being at the discretion of the planning staff recommendation and the planning board. And as a matter of history on site plan approvals, quite often they are giving waivers and allowing trees to come down for various projects of various kinds. And sometimes they pay into a fund or plant trees elsewhere. And we are keenly interested in, as when we get to the amendments, making sure that, whatever we're doing in terms of renewable energy generation doesn't end up removing the very things that are important to our overall environmental and ecological health.
Just a comment here. This removal of trees provision is for the 200% or less on site.
Okay,
so this
so-
does not require site plan at all.
Okay, so then I don't know why it says that there, if it doesn't require it. So then kick it down to the section under the other provision and then apply what I just said to that. Because it's the same language, is it not?
No. Well,
No, it's
let's
not.
see. Let me.
I know that they threw in some champion trees and whatnot.
Yeah, E.
Here it is.
Yeah, there, I repeat what I just said there.
Okay, yeah, it's applicable here.
Yeah, so that's an item that during our amendment discussion that I would like to address because it's not currently, and I believe it was noted by a staff member from planning, that if you want to protect trees and forests, this isn't necessarily the strongest way to do it. So that's noted.
Okay.
Jeff, as far as Conservation Act and what they require,
Sorry, say again.
could you explain the Forest Conservation Act and what it requires irrespective of what we put into the ZTA?
Forest conservation for sites larger than 5,000 square feet, which seems comically small in terms of what we're dealing with here, requires retention or replanting of trees. And if you take trees down, you have to replace them, I think at a 2-to-1 ratio. So you have lots of incentives to retain forests on site.
But in practice, there are a number of projects that are actually, replanting in areas that are not in the same, for example, watershed. So, and again, if we're looking at the ecological health, especially in watersheds, I think that we should look very carefully about what we're doing here, notwithstanding the provisions in the forest conservation law.
And
To be clear, Caroline, you're not proposing planting trees in lieu of.
That's correct.
All
I'm
right.
talking about protecting healthy forest stand
existing trees.
down to put up solar arrays. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. And in that forest conservation requirement, can the person who takes trees down, can they pay a fee just to not have to put any more up?
Yep.
I think that's I have to look that up, to tell you the truth. I think that's a discretionary. No, I don't think there'd be any circumstances here where the planning board would allow that. And I have to admit, I have to go back to chapter 22A to read that. So give me some time to do that.
May I just ask a question? Just looking at the thing as a whole, between lines 128 and 138, there are 3 sections that have to do with tree removal and tree preservation. So one is if there is something that has been required and approved, that the first one, if there's something that has been required or made a condition of the planning or permitting, that can't be then turned around and taken down. That's what that seems to say. The second one says forest conservation requirements 22A. And the third one then goes into the specifics that Caroline was talking about, trees in floodplains, stream buffers, contiguous forest is particularly important for forest preservation, champion trees, et cetera. So these 3 sections, to me, that they complement each other, right? This whole section is about trees, effectively.
Right. That's correct, but it doesn't prevent the loss of forest canopy. There are certain aspects of that will be up to the discretion of the planning board. And as I'm saying, we're seeing a number of waivers granted or fee in lieu or offsite planting, which is of concern when we're trying to keep the ecological health. So in any case, when we discuss amendments, there'll be some suggestions as to how to remedy that so that we're not doing more damage than good.
Okay, thanks.
Where are we?
Well,
what happened?
We jumped down here because we got involved in the necessary findings. We were, let's see. I don't think there's any, I don't know that there's any interest in changing the conditions for non-agricultural zones. That's not what this ZTA is about. All of this, this language from line 57 all the way down to 100 deals with or 96 deals with that. And you wanted to talk about licensed by the Public Service Commission for things that are over 2 megawatts. Again, the county is preempted from doing anything to these larger facilities. They're public utilities licensed by the Public Service Commission. Zoning does not apply. The Public Service Commission will take comments from the local government, but the zoning is preempted. This provision, as it was introduced, just said, hey, by the way, Chapter 59 doesn't apply at all. And as Tommy indicated, this is an abdication of our abilities more than necessary. So the committee wanted to delete this section. But there may be an interest in retaining the current code provision that says if you're over 2 megawatts, you have to comply with section 3.6.7.e, which just says you need conditional use approval, which is a more extensive approval than site plan. It's a discretionary aspect that goes through the Board of Appeals and the hearing examiner to determine whether it's a good thing to do or not.
I'm sorry, can you clarify what you've just said? You're saying that larger facilities would be allowed by conditional use approval?
Larger facilities are allowed because we're preempted by the state to allow them. So right now, we're preempted.
May I?
Let me finish my question and then let you go, Al.
Yeah.
Clear, and I do want, when we're done with this meeting and in the intervening time between now and hopefully the next meeting, in the Google Drive are the PSC guidelines with regard to how they approve these larger facilities. It would be worth your time to look and see what they do with regard to local master plans, local zoning provisions, and in their decision making. And so I think it's quite right, and the committees were quite right in removing this language, because it gives the impression to the PSC that by this zoning text amendment that we're expecting and perhaps having an acquiescence to systems larger than 2 megawatts. And I don't think anyone here is advocating for that. And I think we need to be very protective in our own policies and zoning changes, et cetera, to not having that happen.
And so I want to totally agree with what Caroline said. I was actually one of the folks that recommended taking this language out because, as Jeff said, it sort of gave too much. And I think that's what you're saying, Caroline. The legislation that was passed in, I believe, 2019 basically said that, and the Maryland Association of Counties was a very strong voice in this, that the PSC needed to take into account the local zoning charters, all these other things that we, work to have. And so it does only apply to facilities larger than 2 megawatts. So it's actually nothing about the things we're talking about in the ZTA specifically. But so why would we want to, in a sense, diminish in something that's codified the importance of our own zoning and charters and all those other things, because the PSC is required by law to take them into consideration, although they can override them, but they are legally required to specifically consider them.
The only thing
I agree with taking it out.
The only comment I've got to this is it's going to be interesting how the Public Service Commission looks at it when all of a sudden you now are changing agriculture as a preferred use. And, you can say you're not, but you're skirting on the edge there. And it could be, I don't know whether the right word's precedent setting or what the right terms is. Somebody with more legal background than I do, or I have, need to speak, but it could be interesting.
Well, it is interesting that we were determined to be preempted. And where it was preempted, I think it was Washington County, and now I got to remember, but it was purely in their agricultural area. The master plan said do farming here. It said no industrial stuff. It had all the things that would prohibit it. And the state and the Court of Appeals said the Public Service Commission has the right to determine where it licenses these facilities. End of question. So we are preempted. They have to consider it and then they can reject it. And that's what they did
Could I ask,
specifically.
Right. However, Jeff, I don't think it's,
Jeff, could I ask a question?
I
If
don't
the,
think-
If the Public Service Commission wanted to approve a solar project on the Dickerson coal-fired power plant, which presumably would be more than 2 megawatts, it has the authority to do that. Is that correct?
If they get an application to do that, yes.
Okay, and I presume that we would not oppose that. At least I've heard people on all sides of the ZTA debate say that they hope that we can develop solar and shut down the coal-fired power plant here in Dickerson.
well, the coal-fired plant, property is not, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, but isn't that a commercial or an industrially zoned parcel grandfathered in?
I think it is.
That's not an AR zoned parcel, so that's a different discussion. But Jeff, not to belabor it, but back to your
But
point.
the point is that we would support that, I think. Is that not correct?
Well, yeah, it's an industrial site that currently is using gas or was using coal, so why wouldn't you want it to transition to renewable? I think most would agree, correct? So back to Jeff's point with regard to Washington County, I'm not sure about this, but I don't think that county has a comparable master planned agricultural reserve with all of the preservation initiatives and policies that we have here. So I'm not sure that it's not necessarily accurate to say that the PSC would look at us in the same way as their set aside agricultural area there. I'm just saying.
I would agree with that. They're not the same.
I'll go back to the case. I'm pretty sure they said to the court it's counter to our master plan.
They don't have an agricultural.
Question?
So.
Sorry, may I ask a question? So maybe I lost the thread here, and Tommy, correct me if I'm wrong, but so if we're on line 97, I believe this is the section that was in fact taken out. So it was stricken, correct?
Yep.
And it was stricken specifically for that reason, because the intent of the ZTA, based on feedback from public and other stakeholders, was that they wanted to limit this to 2 megawatts and less, whether it was aggregated net metering or community solar, correct?
Right. Thank you. That's right.
So I guess I'm a little confused as to what the problem is. Why?
I don't think there's a problem. I think we're just trying to move past that. I think there's been a suggestion that it might be revisited by the council, and I think we're just trying to
Okay. Yeah.
To explain why it would be problematic, and to also understand that one of the oft cited justifications for why we need to move forward with this CTA was, golly, the PSC could override us anyway, so don't we want to do this just to let them know what we're doing? And we're trying to say that and I hope that people will look at the document in the Google Drive that goes through quite clearly that the PSC does give deference to, especially things like a master planned agricultural reserve.
That's absolutely right. The PSC will defer to the local community, particularly for these smaller systems, but even in general for the larger systems, they will defer to the local municipality.
Right. And Jeff's shaking his head no, but I'm telling you, all I can say is what it says in the document that's in the Google Drive, and it goes through a list and a process, and the local jurisdiction certainly is given deference by word. Whether it's by deed, I don't know what to tell you, except that they did turn away the Georgetown project, which would have taken down a few trees.
They don't have to, but they certainly do give it considerable weight, but they also do a balance on the extent that a developer may have tried to conform to all of the stakeholder comments and such. So, but I will leave it there because thank you
Al,
for articulating
so
the issue.
Sometimes I wonder if and I hope somebody's taking notes about these discussions. This is a very important discussion, a good discussion. And I would suggest that whoever's taking notes, or maybe someone write this down, that this group should recommend that that language stays out.
Agreed.
I think that would be a good
All right.
idea.
I think the next the next flagged area, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, which I'm likely to be, is from 109 to 112.
Oh, I think Jeff answered that question. He was saying that that is as defined by the planning board. I would simply like to caution us. I do have heard that there have been waivers granted on some of these items. And the chair of the planning board articulated that he thought that these systems would do well in wetlands. And I would like to hope that the folks on this working group would agree that that probably is not a good idea. And we want to make every possible assurance that we're not going to be granting waivers to despoil our streams or our wetlands. So just throwing that out there.
Okay.
Carolyn, could you give us an example of the kind of waiver that has been granted, how much area it covered, what it was for?
Sorry, Siri's now talking. Siri was going to answer your question. There on the eastern rural area, eastern part of the reserve, and I'm forgetting the town, there was a solar array earlier this year or this past year, late last year, that had applied for placement in wetlands stream buffer. And I don't have the citation now, and I don't remember the acreage, but there was a waiver that I believe was granted at the planning board level. And this was flagged by I was notified by the community and they didn't understand how that would happen. So I'm sorry, I don't have the citation now. I can certainly put it on the Google Drive, but that and the forest issue and waiver.
Rooftop solar?
Are you not hearing me?
We're losing you there.
Broke up.
That's what's happening out with no broadband. Apologize. Did you hear any of that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, then I'm done.
We lost you when you started talking about forests.
I'm just saying that the planning board has been granting waivers here and there. It has been a problem that has been flagged, and I think that we need to exercise abundant caution in terms of loss of forests and damage to irreplaceable water resources.
Very good.
Yeah. Could you please put those examples onto the Google Drive so we can see the details of them?
Sure.
Leslie, help me here. I think are we at one? I think we went to 128 about the trees, maybe. Is that that's what I had marked. Tell me if we missed something between there.
I think if we're okay with there, yeah, we need to go down to the trees and then through 150 is what I have marked.
Yeah, I feel like we talked about trees enough in this.
Yeah.
Part.
I think that was an earlier reference and we moved it over there because that was the true section where it belonged.
And Carolyn, are you good with the stormwater management?
Yeah, I feel that the stormwater management, we're a little hampered in that regard because the industries, the definition of these facilities that they're not impervious. I'll be interested to see how that bears out, especially on slopes, but I don't know that there's anything we can do about how imperviousness is defined with regard to stormwater effect. So I don't have anything to offer in that regard.
Okay.
I have a question on line 141. It says, except for the pad areas for transformers and electrical equipment, the use of concrete must be prohibited. This agrivoltaic thing, does that require some type of a footer or something? I'm not familiar with it. So this is just a question that I have.
Agrivoltaic agriculture requires dirt, requires soft ground under these panels. So this provision to prohibit concrete increases the area available for planting, number one, and number two, reduces the impediments to returning the area to soil if the panels are never used again.
I would like to rephrase it. I probably need to rephrase that. I thought for anything to grow there, I can't imagine how it grows underneath these low running panels. So if they get these panels up in the air, I assume they would have to have cement for a footer to hold them up there.
They do not. They can be pile driven into the ground, and it works.
Okay.
Pardon me.
And that's in fact the standard way it's done. The standard way is not to put concrete footers under the panels.
Caroline?
I'm sorry, someone just reminded me that there was a question, Jeff, wherever it refers, have we gotten to the section that refers to pollinator plants? Or are we not there yet?
We went by it.
Okay, can we scoot?
We flagged it.
Yeah, so
120.
yeah, just a note that was brought to us by some of our colleagues at Audubon Naturalists and others that the state pollinator friendly program unfortunately allows for herbicide, other control mechanisms that aren't really pollinator friendly. So they really have flagged that the potential not pollinator friendly. I'm not sure how to address that, but just throwing that out there.
Caroline, there is actually an amendment that tries to deal with that in that list of amendments that.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. Okay, great.
Yeah, I have a suggested amendment that was in my list.
Yeah, we'll get there. It's in the list of amendments.
Thanks for reminding me. I just see his stuff, so thank you.
Okay.
It's a good topic. It's an important topic. Can I just one thing about pollinator friendliness while we're scrolling? The kind of plants that are used have much deeper roots than the kind of turf grass that often is associated with solar projects. And so one of the benefits of pollinator friendly plantings and the other things that might be used like grazing and so on, is that the roots are much deeper. So they're much better for stormwater and runoff protection than either gravel, which used to be the old thing that was done with solar projects, or turf grass, which has roots of about 1/2 inch or 2. So these have roots that go down, 3, 4, 12 feet sometimes, these natural and native plants. So they're great for stormwater management.
I'd only have one correction there, Al.
Al,
Tall fescue has roots at least 36 inches deep when it's established.
I wish I could get that stuff in my lawn. It doesn't, mine don't go that deep.
Okay.
yeah. I think this is one of the major advantages of pollinator-friendly vegetation, that it is composed of perennial plants. That is, they last through the whole year and they cover the whole ground surface, as opposed to row crop agriculture, where you have considerable amounts of bare soil.
No, that I have to correct you on
during the
that.
growing season and during the winter, and that's true even if you have cover crops or you have other kinds of conservation programs. Using literature is fairly clear on this. I put a couple of the studies into the Google Drive. Perennial vegetation is better than annual vegetation. It reduces erosion, it reduces sediment loss.
Okay, so just to be clear, this is an agricultural reserve, and we do have a rather robust program, the nutrient management program, and our practices here do not result in disturbed bare soil. And I did put also into the Google Drive the stream quality map that shows that the highest quality streams flow from our agricultural reserve. So the idea that there's sediment flow from our farming practices, again, is just not accurate. And notwithstanding the benefits of
I'm sorry, Carolyn, this is simply not correct. There is bare soil between the rows of corn, soy, and wheat.
And Doug, I beg to differ. I got to tell you, you're going to have bare soil underneath these solar fields too. Was simply when you stop photosynthesis,
not if you have
you're going to
perennial
alter the
vegetation.
ground for a long, long time.
well, I mean, Doug, I went and toured a local.
The science is clear that it's not true, Randy. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So
I hope
we're
you'll
gonna have
look
to-
up
we're
the
gonna have to
scientific
agree.
papers that have studied this and shown the reduction in erosion.
I'd be interested in reading some of that science. I really would.
Well, it's in the Google Drive, but notwithstanding,
They're in the Google Drive.
I think
I'll
we're
look
gonna
at it.
have to, I think we're gonna have to agree to disagree here. And there's science and there's science. This, if you're saying that our practices in the reserve are creating erosion and degradation of the waterways, the science isn't showing that. We have people that are actually in the audience
I'm
today.
sorry.
It's not accurate. We are not degrading the water from our.
I'm sorry. The science is clear on that. And if you have count Google Drive, if you have scientific studies, please put it in the Google Drive, but you certainly haven't so far.
But your studies are not the on the ground effects of our agriculture here. When our DEP does water quality monitoring and puts out their stream conditions, it is not showing a degradation of streams due to our agricultural practices. Much to the contrary, they are running cleaner than they are in other parts of the county.
It is showing erosion. It is certainly showing erosion and water runoff, and the USGS studies of the rates of runoff from our streams show that we have it. I'm amazed that you're going to really say that when we have the same kinds of agriculture as in other parts of the country, that we don't have the same agricultural problems in other parts of the country.
We have different.
Science
Our
doesn't
soil
back that up.
practices here are superior to other large-scale farming. We have nutrient management programs that see to it. Our no-till practices have seen to it, and you can shake your head, but the stream conditions tell the story, and the stream conditions are excellent or good.
Please provide evidence for that.
It's in the Google
Please provide
Drive.
scientific evidence for that.
It is in the Google Drive.
Where?
In the mapping from
Where?
the DPS in the Google Drive. So we won't argue about it right now, but if you go to the
It
Google,
does not show that.
it's into the Google Drive.
Carolyn,
All
may I ask
right.
a question? Is there something specific that a solar facility could do that could be helpful in particular to any of the water issues that we've been discussing for the last minute?
Sure, I think that's a great question. I think any facility that assures that it has native plantings that are not removed mechanically or otherwise, that would be helpful. But again, it should be, since it's an agricultural reserve, we want to have best agricultural practices in the areas. We've talked about having co-location of agriculture and and the photo arrays, the solar
Agrivoltaic.
arrays. But you know, the benefits, here's the problem with this section here, and we'll get to this later, but it doesn't talk about pollinator friendly plants and photo or agrivoltaics or grazing or what have you. It talks about or. So a company and the industry can choose to do the easiest item on that list. You pick it, whether it's just having something in a manner suitable for grazing, or whether it's having some plants that attract bees, or whether it's plants that are managed or maintained for other, the last item, which would probably be less attractive. That doesn't look like it's going to be agriculture. It doesn't look like it's going to, you know, support the purpose of the zone. And that's the consistent issue that we've had. And I hope that when we get to the amendment section, we can help to resolve that.
Okay, good points. Let's, I think maybe we're down to reporting, section 3. And I think the question there, is there a question there with that section? Somebody flagged it.
Yeah, I had this as Caroline.
What I do? Help me
Well,
out.
it's about the total acreage, and I think I've had some conversations.
So yeah, here we go. Yeah, sorry, thanks, sorry, somebody texted me, Dwayne. Here we go. When we're talking about the total acreage that is covered with the facilities, it seems to me that all that's being calculated or monitored is those systems that are going through site plan approval. So hypothetical, you could have, you know, let's say every farm or every other farm in the reserve says, hey man, we really want to do the 200%. So you have quite a bit of acreage occupied with those facilities. Plus you have these other net metered systems and the community solar, and the PSC says, hey, you guys, we decided we want to put in, you know, we're approving 350 acre facilities. Well, what total are you at then? We would like to, whatever the figure is, we'd like to have a cumulative running total of what we're covering, not rooftops, not pavement, but green fields, et cetera. What's being covered with solar, so we can keep a full idea of its impact and the potential loss of farm soil. So that's
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess, and again, I'm trying to hold my tongue until we get to amendments, but when we talk about acreage of land covered with solar arrays, we want to be clear that that includes not just the square footage of the glass panel, composite panel, but it includes the square footage of all the land needed for that whole operation. So if you need to have mowed strips around it or in between it, or, you know, that has to be, that would all be counted, I guess.
Very good. Very robust discussion there. It's now 7:42, and I think we're ready to move to item 2. Leslie, would you like to take over some of this and guide us a little bit here?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Do we want to start with the easy one and go back to Al's first amendment, and then we can go from there?
Let's start at the top.
Leslie,
Yeah.
Leslie, could I suggest that we precisely start out with the easy ones, the discussion that we all agree on, so we can get those approved first, and then we can successfully move to ones that are a little tougher. So Al's, I think, was the first one. I think we had a couple others, for example, the requirement that the land not just be suitable for one of the 3 kinds of use, but actually be managed for it, actually be in that. And it seemed like we had pretty unanimous agreement on those. So why don't we do those two first?
Is there any objection to that?
I don't have an objection to that, but as we're entering into the second agenda item, I do want to make, for the record, I'd like to make a statement. And that notwithstanding the work that we're doing in this committee or this work group, that many of us remain deeply concerned that this ZTA is flawed, regardless of what amendments we put to it, because it is not in sync with the process coming forward with a comprehensive climate change plan. It is not in compliance with the master plan for the preservation of agriculture and open space, that it has been rushed through during a pandemic, that we remain deeply concerned about the potential loss of productive soil. So I'm saying that so that you know that we are working on this, but we're working on it with real serious reservation, and we want that we just want people to know that these concerns remain about how we're engaging in this process out of sync and without, for example, even economic analysis of impact. So that's all. Thank you.
I typed that out. Thank you.
And I'd like to second mostly, not mostly, entirely what Caroline said. We also have those concerns, and I think the one I'd like to emphasize is that she mentioned at the end is that almost every major zoning change that is considered by the council, an economic impact study is done by the council, and they turn that over to their research team to do that, and nothing has been done for this particular ZTA. And that is one of the major concerns of this community, is the economic impact this will have on our way of life here and our farming activities and the raison d'etre for this community. So I really find that sort of breathtakingly remiss on the part of the council for not doing that. Also a feasibility study to indicate, I mean, we've had a lot of chat, a lot of people have weighed in and said, wait a minute, can you even do this? How will this hook up to a transmission line? Where will it hook up? And that feasibility study has not been done either. So that's just another two missing components of this ZTA that I think are glaringly a problem as you go forward and trying to decide whether this is good for our county. And really, I mean, we're all county residents here. We all want to see more solar in this county. We want more clean energy. We sound like we're fighting it tooth and nail, but we want it done right, and we want it done quickly. And there are ways to do it that aren't necessarily when you have to supplant farm activities. And I know that there are those people on the committee who have said that's not true, but I think you look carefully at how the county incentivizes facilities in this county so that it's possible for our solar developers who come in here and would like to do this work for us, make them make a living on it, but not supplant the activities that are so precious to Montgomery County.
Yeah, I will have just to let you know, in the Google Drive just released, the Chesapeake Bay Journal has a piece with regard to citing solar and where it should go and where it should not go, and the cost of haste in terms of loss of, among other things, arable acreage. So that is a good piece. It's in there, and again, it's from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Just out.
So it's at some point, and sorry, Leslie, I'm just going to say this because this is directed to you and Franny. At some point, it would be, I think, useful for this group to hear from you both about what the county could do to make areas that are less precious for other purposes. How can we make our surfaces that are would be used better for solar sightings more attractive to you as an industry, representative? That I see it being done in New Jersey. I see it being done in New York City. I see it being done in Massachusetts. And what would you like to see in Montgomery County to make that happen here, so that we don't have to give up farmland to environmentally sensitive areas for this kind of production?
Those markets are very different.
Could we go back to the amendment process? I believe that was what we're going to go on with now.
Yeah, I do just want to, I don't want to just brush over what you said. And I think those are conversations that I would like to continue with you. And I think that what you're asking is incredibly complicated and not something that Montgomery County can tackle on its own. That does not mean that I don't think that we can try to figure out a way to move those conversations forward. And I'm absolutely open to figuring out what that kind of looks like. But I also just want to be very honest that at this moment in time, the Maryland market as a whole does not have the structure to be able to implement a program like Massachusetts and New Jersey.
So there's nothing Montgomery County can do to entice solar facilities on anything but farmland.
I mean, we've been looking at a lot of different things in order to try to figure out how to make the projects financeable and work. And Franny, you can talk about this more if you'd like. And just to be completely frank, at this moment, I don't know. I think that this is a longer conversation that I would really love to have with you. Because I think it's an important one, and I'm open to trying to figure out what those things are, but also out of the scope of what this working group is. But can you call me and we can have a conversation on it even tomorrow? Would that work?
Well, I think it's very relevant to this CTA, unfortunately, because we're talking about the goal of the whole thing is to get more solar into our county.
Yeah.
And no, excuse me. The goal is to reduce our carbon footprint in the county. Our goal is to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that we are producing and become carbon neutral. That's the goal of this whole thing.
Yep.
It's not, so this is a mechanism to that goal, and that's how it's presented by the sponsors.
Yep. So would you take me up on my offer to give me a call tomorrow?
Sure, but I think it should be discussed in this whole group. Maybe we could, do it in the next session if you prefer.
Give me a call tomorrow and we can discuss what that looks like. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I just want to remind everybody, our charge is to recommend amendments to the Joint Committee and the County Council. And I hope we can get to that.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like we all have many more that are possibilities. I'll kindly organize those into groups. That is what we're supposed to be doing here. Let's get to it, please.
I think we are, but I think we also want to make sure that the final product of our recommendations is properly informed and that members of the group feel heard, Doug. And I think that it's important to do that. So yeah, we're doing that now.
The one thing I did want to see, and I may be absolutely misinformed, so Doug, L, you can kill me, and also Tommy, you can kill me if I'm wrong, but is there an economics study or an economics impact of this program that was just done? Am I wrong?
Am I on? If I can talk for a second, I've been doing ZTAs for 14 and a half years. They never come with economic studies. bills are required to have fiscal impact studies. That's not a requirement of ZTAs, and they have not been done as a matter of course or in specifics. I can't remember any economic study done with the ZTA.
So I was wrong. My bad.
Do they
Um,
have to do an economic study if they do a map amendment?
No. They do not.
Do they ever do an economic study if it's clear that there's going to be a negative economic impact?
No, again, the economic studies, if you're talking about fiscal impact studies, are required with bills, and they're required to be done by the OMB. But they are not required for master plans. They're not required, although sometimes we get comments from the executive on that, but they're not a requirement. And there's certainly not a requirement with zoning text amendments. And I've never seen any. 14 and a half years.
Well, I'm dumbfounded that there would be changes contemplated to zoning that would have a clear impact on an existing industry or business sector, and that the county would not be interested to knowing what that impact would be on the existing business or industry. So notwithstanding your experience over 14 years, the concern remains. And separate from whether or not an impact study or an economic impact study would be conducted, we did go through a laborious process with a climate change group, and that is a work product that hasn't informed the CTA either, and that was one of the other concerns. But look, I want to get us back noting that we're going to be going to the amendments. I just want to make it clear that these were not unreasonable questions that people had with regard to what was informing the ZTA. That's all. Thank you.
okay. Al, you ready?
Yeah.
You're up.
Yeah. So my simple amendment was about a clarification of community solar. And I had wanted to mention when we just in this discussion of what Montgomery County could do, that community solar projects to serve the number of residents that they're supposed to serve are generally 2 megawatts in size, which is bigger than most roofs. And so pretty much bigger than any roof I'm aware of. So, but anyway, in terms of clarifying what was in the text about community solar, when we got into that first section where we had the references, the zoning references, we had Maryland Code 7-306, which is the general net metering umbrella rule, and COMAR 20.50.10, which is where the specifics of net metering are laid out. But again, neither of them are specific to community solar. I was simply suggesting that we add the specific reference to the regulations that define and govern the community solar project that were set by the PSC, and that is COMAR 20.62. And I so move.
I just want to clarify. I had thought that
I would,
putting forward amendments, we weren't voting on them this evening.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, but I appreciate that, Al, and I think that there's been fairly uniform agreement that that's going to be one that we'll probably all support.
Yeah. Oh, I thought maybe we were going to try and knock a couple off. So
do we
get
have to
something-
vote on it if we have
a couple of
uniform?
notches in our belt?
I just want to pipe in, you don't have to have anything done until January 1st. So
Yeah.
I don't think you have to vote on anything. And in terms of what Doug said earlier, Booker, this is, I know from Councilmember Katz, he wanted to bring this together for compromise and to really make sure all voices are heard. And if you don't allow questions or discussion, that's not going to work. You can't just go too fast to get to, in this case, the amendments. It's really more about making sure everyone is, hopefully on the same page and could come to some things that they all feel good about.
No, thanks, Lori. I just thought that this was one of there
Well,
seemed to be some.
Lori,
consensus.
with all
And
due
I just
respect,
thought it would
we've
be,
already,
I thought it would feel
we
good to.
we have already
something done.
used,
That's all.
we've already used up 2 meetings and 3/4 of the 3rd meeting before we've gotten to the amendments and the compromises. So I don't think it's too soon to ask us to start considering specific amendments.
Okay, so I just want to point out that the very first meeting was administrative only. We did not get into the substance. So we have had one meeting prior to this meeting to discuss something that has significant implications. And so I, again, take issue with the notion that we have wasted or misdirected any time, and appreciate Lori's clarification. Thank you.
So why don't we put, make a list of the things that are recommended and that people seem to agree on it, even if we don't agree on, because we may have to vote. And then we'll have, I don't know if the next meeting or at some future time, we vote on those things, but we have them all in a list so that we can go back and look at them and come back together and
Please.
go through them.
Well,
So that was
I would
Comar
strongly support that.
20.62,
Yeah,
line, I guess it'd be around there,
20.6.
line 12.
That would be in line 12, yes.
What's next?
so in that same area, since we're there and we're talking, I thank you, Al. I think that's really good to add that in. I've wanted that in there since the beginning. I think we also need to clarify that we would like these to be community solar projects under that rubric, that 20.62 definition, but with the additional requirement that the receiving community for community solar projects under that rubric be within Montgomery County. So the community that's benefiting from these projects be within our county.
So can you expand on what your definition of the community benefiting?
Yeah, so it's my understanding that, and maybe this is wrong, Franny, but under community solar, you have a community that is going to benefit from an industrial or commercial, call it what you want, set of installations. And that could be, a group of multifamily homes in Gaithersburg or in Damascus or in Silver Spring. And those people all sign up for this program, and then the project is built, and the receiver are those specific individuals or set of buildings. Is that correct, Franny?
No, not exactly.
Okay.
Typically, the project is built and then the subscribers are signed up.
I see. So
Okay.
then I guess I would say I would want the subscribers who receive this solar to be in Montgomery County.
Unfortunately, the state law would not allow that.
The county can't write that into the ZTA?
I don't believe so.
Why?
Because the energy has to be made available to any electricity user and customer of the EDC, the electric distribution company, which is BGE, Pepco, or First Energy, or Potomac Edison.
Okay.
That serves that particular community.
Uh-huh. So you're telling me that we
Lauren,
could
I have a
build,
question about this.
we could build all of these facilities, and no one in Montgomery County might be the receiver of those.
No, anyone could, absolutely.
No, but it could potentially be no one.
If they chose not to subscribe.
Right, right.
Absolutely have the right to subscribe, and they would be the first probably marketed too. I'm just guessing from what makes sense from the administrators, but absolutely they could participate and most likely would.
Well,
it could potentially be everyone.
Lauren, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, Lauren, can I ask a question about what you're proposing?
Sure. Of course.
You're saying that nobody outside of the county could subscribe to community solar in the county? Are you also saying that nobody in the county can subscribe to community solar from any other county? In other words, does this go both ways, or is it just that we don't allow our electricity to go out, but we'll take electricity from others?
Yes, yes, that's number two, because this CTA has been promoted from the beginning as a way for us to reduce our carbon emissions and get to a, a net zero output within the county, That's the reason it's been promoted. That's every letter that has come from Mr. Reamer's office, every letter that's come from the promoters of it have said that's the purpose of this. And for us to give up prime farmland for this, we have to at least be able to say that we're serving
Yeah,
our
I guess
county.
I don't understand why others would supply us with electricity if we're not willing to supply them.
Because Doug, that's a business decision for anyone. I mean,
I don't understand why they do it, and I don't understand why it's fair.
You start a business to anything. You can sell it to anybody, anywhere you want. Selling your product, anyone can buy it. And I frankly, and this has come from the county
But
executive's
you're not
office.
allowing that.
No, I'm
You're
not allowing.
that.
I'm saying that if we are using our
You're
land,
saying you
it
can't
should
sell it to
benefit
somebody
our
in Frederick
county.
County.
Sorry, you talking over me. I'm saying that if we're using our land, we should be benefiting
sorry.
our county. And I don't know why you oppose that.
But if others use their land,
well, that's their choice. That's their choice.
So
I'm saying this is our
so
choice.
they should
as a
sell it to
county.
us, but we shouldn't be able to sell it to them.
not from the
Right.
agricultural
And let me
reserve.
make it clear, it's
Not from the agricultural reserve, no.
I mean, we've taken a preservation plan and we've said, okay, because we need to have an emergency to meet our carbon neutral goals, we're going to open up this area to this industry in potential or likely conflict with the master plan itself, because we need to meet our goal. But now we're saying, but we're really maybe not meeting our goal because we're going to put it on the open market. And that's what Lauren's saying, is that isn't meeting our goal. And at the
we're
same,
not going to put it on the open market.
we are.
It's not on the
It
open
is.
market. It has to be part of the community solar project.
But the open market with
It has to be part of the state
solar.
community solar program.
It's a matter of semantics. What I'm saying is the open market with regard to community solar in terms of the people who buy into the program. Again, there have been from the beginning provisions that have been stated are the goals of this ZTA. Lauren just articulated that the goal has been from the beginning that it will get us to meet our carbon neutral goal. How does it do that? How do you register the metrics being purchased outside the county? How do you do that?
Are we not carbon neutral? Are we not carbon neutral if we send as much electricity outside the county as we import from community solar located in other counties?
I don't think that
matters, isn't it?
I don't think that is how the county has said. They're saying our consumption has to be met through renewable energy, not that we're going to continue to purchase ours from the regular sources and then let other people do it. We're not trying to be parochial on this. It's just that this is the goal that has been stated, the metrics.
Sounds to me that's exactly what you're doing.
No, sir. If our consumers are not using renewable energy in this county, we are not meeting our carbon neutral goals. That's what we're saying. How do you make sure that we're meeting our carbon?
I'm sorry. We produce as much solar energy and put it into the grid as we use from the grid. Whether it's coming from our land or somebody else's land, they have to balance out. That's what carbon neutral means.
Jeff, I don't know if this is a good question for you, because I think if this is something that the PSC would not allow under state law. Is that something that you could look into? I mean, okay, great.
It's a possible issue of preemption that, in this way hasn't been raised before that I'll have to look at. But we might in fact be preempted under these programs.
Okay. Because I think if we can answer that question, then we can try to figure out how to find a way to also make sure that we're meeting Montgomery County's goals in a meaningful way, but we also want to make sure that Montgomery County is putting something in that is within your purview.
Yeah, I don't want to say what I don't know, but the other thing I have to say is this is zoning and not some of these other side routines as well. This is dealing on what is allowable within a zone of the county. So
can you, I'm sorry, can you also ask, and I'm happy to ask my people, but I also want to make sure you're an independent arbitrator. Can you also ask if the PSC has to take guidance from the county on these things, like similar to the preemption of large utility scale projects?
They have to consider. I think this is below their scale of utility licensing. It's under a different provision.
Okay, fair point. That's a good flag.
But let me do some research on the preemption. I'll certainly be ready when it gets back to council.
Okay. Well, is that helpful, Lauren, on being able to answer that question on whether we can even put that clause into the ZTA?
Yeah, that would be very useful. I mean, I think, I think however this is written and whatever is permitted, it really has to be energy that's used in our county. We're not, the purpose of this CTA is not to create, a new industry here that we can export to other places. That's not, you would never do that in an urban county on the East Coast to create for export to the world. That's not something, I mean, the county executive's office has said we should not have to be, we are not poised to be producing all our energy. We can buy clean energy and we should, but for us to be producing it all, we're an urban county and on the East Coast of the US. It's not a place that's going to happen, or should have to happen. Let's put it that way.
Okay, excellent.
Leslie?
Yes.
Yeah, just a couple of, this is a very important and complicated discussion. So there are some aspects of it that we haven't considered. And one of it is the whole nature of electricity and, what it means, because if you put electricity on one place, take it off someplace else, is it the same electricity? Yes, no. But two other factors. One, when we actually do someday, hopefully before long, get to 100% clean energy, clean renewable energy, not a big nuke fan, we will be producing some of that energy in Montgomery County, and we will be buying some of it from outside the county and probably from the state, because most of the wind power will be generated either offshore or somewhere where there's a lot more wind turbines than we're likely to have on land in Maryland. But we will still be at 100% clean energy. And so the thinking about what does it mean to be moving from fossil fuels to clean energy really comes down to having more clean energy that makes less demand for fossil fuels. So that's a sort of an overarching way of thinking about it. The other issue that's much more nitty gritty is one of the reasons it's restricted to utilities is because with community solar, because it is virtually net metered, that means that the people who get the solar get a full credit for it. It's just subtracted from their bill the way it would be if it were on their roof and it never went through their meter at all. Because with community solar, because it's located somewhere else, but you use it in your home, then it comes into your home through the meter, but you're getting credit for the solar, so it's subtracted from your bill. The utilities are the people that are responsible for that billing. And so that's irrespective of what county, town, municipality you live in. The utility is the one that actually manages the program in that regard. And that's why, one reason why it's restricted to utilities.
Yeah, good. I understand that.
Al, those are all great points. I wouldn't argue. Only thing, quick comment is I don't think any of that was meant to be done at the expense of agriculture as a business.
Right.
Or a zone that's been 4 or 5 decades in the making.
Yeah,
So,
Randy, no, I totally agree with, with what I thought we were trying to do is to make this, through this discussion, make this so that it was beneficial to the agricultural nature of our county as well. And I thought that was one of the tests that we had.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the clock, and if we're going to, well, I leave this up to you, Doug, do we want to keep forging ahead, or do we want to give some time for the public to ask some questions? Because I think that depends on where we go next on amendments.
Could we do one more? And that's the one that actually was suggested by Dan Savino of Poolsville Green, that would require that lands not simply be suitable for one of the 3 kinds of uses, agrivoltaics, solar grazing, or pollinator friendly, but it actually be managed and used for that. I think that's something we can all agree on, and if so, we can put it on our list of things that we agree.
Any objections?
I do have some discussion.
It would only take a few minutes, and
Well, maybe and maybe not.
okay.
Okay, so I totally, I think it's already been, number 2 and 3 have already been somewhat edited to require. So if you're going to have grazing, it's going to be actively grazed, not just suitable for grazing. And I think that's a great change, and I appreciate that that was done. And also that if it's going to be co-location of agriculture, then it actually has to be planted, managed, and maintained as agriculture. I guess my concern is that to say that it can, the first one should not be a choice between the 3. It has to be 2 and 3, because 1, I would love to see, I mean, maybe we talk about, you have, I think, Doug's, your point that if you can underplant these things with dense perennials, and if they can be successful, that certainly is a million times better than gravel. But if they're going to be underplanted, there has to be, that has to be 5 or 10% or something of the farm. And then you have, if you have 10 acres of underplanted with pollinator friendly habitat, you need 100 acres of commodity crop or tomatoes or whatever. So I think we can't consider all these parcels. They can't just have perennial native plants under them and call that agriculture. They service agriculture, but you can't supplant farming for pollinator friendly areas.
The reason I brought it up is I believe it's not part of the ZTA right now. It's a proposed amendment. And I was saying, I think we can all support it. Now, if you want to add further limitations or restrictions, that would be another amendment, but at least I think we can support the language that Jeff is showing on the screen there, because it's not part of the ZTA right now.
Oh, okay. So I thought it looks like it's been changed already. Deleted by committee. Is that
This-
not,
I'm sorry, this was a proposal by Councilmember Reamer after the joint committee had met. So certainly he would raise this too if the joint committee meets again before it gets to council. But
Yeah,
it's
if
not
I
part
can-
of
If I can
what's
speak
been approved.
just quickly, I mean, Jeff basically said it all, but we learned about, how the section was lacking in specificity and,
Yeah.
teeth.
2 and 3, right?
Yeah, after, right, in 2 and 3 after the committee meeting. So at the good suggestion of Dan Savino, as Doug mentioned, Hans asked Jeff to draft this amendment. And it is not currently in the ZTA, but,
But it says that it was deleted by the committee already. Is that, so that's not accurate?
No, this is not in the committee report, and this would be new language that came
Oh,
in.
so those double brackets don't really mean what Jeff said they meant.
No, it does mean what I said I would meant because it's an action that occurs after introduction.
Doug and Leslie, I just want to remind you, we have 10 minutes. So if you want to take questions, we probably can fit 2 or 3 in before we need to end this Zoom call.
One quick thing here, if I can interject, on this part here somewhere, and I don't know whether this is where it goes or not, but, somewhere along the line, I stay confused on really what is going to end up being in this thing and what's going to be taken out of it when it's presented to the county. I'm struggling with all of that myself personally, but, maintained and who's going to enforce and those kinds of questions. I think somewhere, I don't know whether this is the place that they go for agrivoltaics and pollinators and those kinds of things, but, conservation plan or a soil conservation plan or nutrient management plan associated with those types of farming, should they be included here?
Absolutely. Mhm.
We have to do it on all other ag sectors out here in the AR zone. There's no reason they shouldn't practice those good practices too. It's good technology, good tools.
Randy, those are definitely things we should discuss, and I hope you'll write it up so we can have it proposed as an amendment and recommend it to the council. And as far as I can tell, I haven't heard anybody opposing it. They just say they would like to make at least accept this proposal.
I'm going to jump in here and let Laurie have the calm for a minute, and let's at least let a few questions get past us here, please.
Okay, Jeff, maybe you can stop sharing if that's okay. And I'm looking right now for hands raised for questions. I'm not seeing any right now. Wait 1 second.
Maybe we answered them all.
Yes, Diane Cameron, you can, I am unmuting you right now, so you can speak. Diane, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Lori. I was responding to a previous, earlier conversation tonight about how the agricultural reserve is where our highest quality streams are located, according to data collected over many decades by our county scientists. And I will put a map into the Google Drive that that shows this. And I think another person also shared another map about that as well.
Great.
Could I respond to that? The question is not whether the agricultural reserve has less erosion or less sedimentation than the urban parts of the county. Of course it does. The question is whether pollinator-friendly vegetation, which is perennial and keeps the soil covered all year, as less erosion and less sedimentation than row crops such as corn, soy, and wheat, which are the dominant crops in the agricultural reserve. So please provide some evidence on that issue and not simply on whether the agricultural reserve is better than the urban parts of the county. That I think we can all agree with.
I don't think that notwithstanding the interest in that exercise, I don't think that this CTA, and I don't even think that the sponsors of this CTA are trying to promote the notion that somehow agriculture is a problem that needs to be corrected by the CTA. They're trying to put forward a zoning text amendment that will advance renewable energy and access to affordable renewable energy, if I'm not mistaken, and not correcting what you may perceive to be the deficits or deficiencies of agriculture.
Okay,
We have
Deficits
about
and
53 deficiencies are part of the climate problem.
Thank you, Doug. We have 53 people on the call. I don't see another hand right now. Yes, I do. Patricia Tice, I am going to allow you to speak. Okay. For some reason, okay, you're using a different version of Zoom, so you're going to be promoted to a panelist. Okay. Okay, Patricia, you can speak now.
You're on mute, Patricia.
There you go.
Patricia? Okay. I'm not sure what happened to Patricia, but Lee, oh, there you are. Okay, Patricia, go ahead. Okay, you're on mute. So I can't unmute you. You'd have to do it yourself. Okay.
Put it in the chat. Put in whatever you have to say in the chat.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to unmute you, but it's not working. Okay, we're going to go to Lee Langstaff. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, well, if Patricia gets back on, we'll let her in. Thank you, and thank you for allowing us to, many of us, to listen in on this conversation. My question and request is procedural, really. You all, as you've been talking, may not have had a chance to be watching what's happening in the chat. There's a lot of very interesting and informed discussion going on there. And I understand after requesting, to see the chat from last meeting, that wasn't captured. And I really hope that you all are going to make an effort, and I know it's possible on Zoom, I've seen how it's done, to capture the chat and to be able to make it available for people to review.
I thought the chat was captured. Yeah, the chat was captured. So look in the Google Drive.
It is in the Google Drive? Okay,
Yes,
well, I wasn't able to find it. I wasn't able to find it earlier on, right after the meeting, so.
Okay.
Okay,
Small
thank you.
clarification, it was captured. I don't know that it's in the Google Drive publicly viewable, but we'll make sure last week that gets up and this.
Okay, that'd be most helpful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Okay, the next person is A. Wordlet. I'm going to unmute you right now. Okay, are you able to go ahead?
They're muted.
Okay, you have to unmute.
Al, can you unmute yourself?
Okay.
Yeah, you're muted still.
Yes, you. Can you try now? Okay, I don't. Let's see. Okay, I'm sorry about that, but we will go to one last person, Patty Mcrae. And
thank you, Lori. I did get a pop-up screen that asked whether I wanted to unmute or not, but maybe the others didn't get it. My question is, at one point there was a discussion about maybe taking this slowly and seeing what the effect was if a limited number of installations were allowed to go forward with whatever amendments we have. But the predictions of the economic effects on farmers who lease their land are pretty serious and dire, okay? And destroying farmers in an ag reserve is not exactly coherent policy. And I wonder if there's any thought to some kind of compensation that would be paid to farmers who are leasing land now. If the price of land increases astronomically because of solar being allowed in the ag reserve. I think if farmers were assured that they could still farm, then I don't think there would be the same amount of objection. However, I don't know of anybody who has deep money bags available to compensate them. Or
we are at 8:30, so someone will try to answer your question, but we are going to have to wrap up. So if someone wants to respond, that would be great.
Just quickly, the council can do whatever the council wants to do to spend money, but zoning is not the way you spend money. It would require another bill to do. You'd have to do it in a different piece of legislation.
And can I just add, Laurie, I actually am working on trying to get, there's substantial information from other parts of the country, mainly the Midwest, Minnesota, Illinois, and Indiana, that have done actually comparative studies of the effect of having solar on land, and actually were controls looking at comparable land that did not have solar next to it, and have seen essentially no effect on price. But we don't have data yet from Maryland. I'm actually reaching out to folks in Prince George's and Frederick and Baltimore counties where there is solar being built, to see if anyone has documented the experience from those counties, to see whether there is any effect on agricultural land cost. So far, no one has noted any. But
okay, thank you. So Doug and Leslie, I think we need to wrap up now.
I'd like to thank everybody for participating tonight, and I do think we got through most of our agenda. At least we got through the ZTA. I think you got to think about it as the people that are watching, they got to see the full ZTA, and I thank everybody for your participation. Leslie?
Thank you. It was a great discussion.
Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.
Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah. Hey, can we agree to any more amendments that we want to discuss next time? Let's go ahead and share them with the group so that, as has been noted, that we can think about them prior to when we get together on the 16th.
Yeah, and Caroline, I'll volunteer to add them to that list that we put together already.
Great.
But yeah, let's get them written down. That makes it a lot easier to talk
Great.
about.
Thanks, Al.
Good night, everyone. Good night.
Good night.